The basement breach revealed a chamber that violated every assumption about Taliban capabilities and priorities. Instead of improvised storage for stolen weapons or basic communication equipment, the SEALs discovered a sophisticated laboratory filled with hardware that looked like it belonged in classified American research facilities rather than Afghan cave systems. Quantum computing arrays hummed with electronic precision, artificial intelligence servers blinked with processing activity, and prototype weapons displayed manufacturing quality that suggested industrial production rather than insurgent improvisation. "Holy shit," whispered Petty Officer Martinez, his voice barely audible through team communications as he processed technology that represented billions of dollars in research and development funding. "This isn't stolen equipment. This is a fully operational research facility." Staff Sergeant Restrepo moved through the chamber with professional caution that couldn't mask growing awareness of strategic deception that extended far beyond simple equipment theft. The laboratory contained prototype systems that weren't supposed to exist outside classified American programs, suggesting technology transfer that involved highest levels of government and defense industry collaboration with hostile forces. "Sir," he transmitted to Lieutenant Commander Vega with barely controlled anger that encompassed both immediate tactical concerns and broader moral outrage about institutional betrayal. "This technology is still classified. Some of these systems aren't even in American operational inventory yet." The discovery confirmed their worst suspicions about serving corporate interests that treated national security as marketing opportunity rather than sacred trust between military personnel and constitutional principles. They weren't recovering stolen American technology. They were participating in elaborate cover-up designed to conceal deliberate transfer of classified research to enemy forces. Lieutenant Commander Vega felt command weight settling across his shoulders as he processed intelligence that revealed corporate collaboration with hostile forces at levels that challenged his understanding of patriotism, duty, and the fundamental purposes of military service. The basement laboratory represented treason dressed in business casual, selling American military secrets to advance quarterly earnings projections. "Viper 77 to Overwatch," he transmitted with battlefield authority that couldn't mask psychological damage of realizing that modern warfare increasingly involved serving masters who measured success in profit margins rather than preserved lives or constitutional integrity. "Objective located. Technology package exceeds preliminary intelligence estimates." Captain Kine's response crackled back through communications with pilots' precision that 18 months of corporate servitude had trained to avoid inconvenient questions about moral implications. "Copy, Viper 77. Begin package extraction. Timeline critical for operational security." The artificial urgency served corporate interests by preventing detailed analysis of technology that would reveal the full extent of American complicity in creating circumstances that justified private military solutions to problems that served billionaire agendas, rather than national defense requirements or constitutional principles that warriors had sworn to defend. Petty Officer Nakamura identified specific equipment that appeared on classified wish lists from American Special Operations units, prototype systems that Pentagon bureaucracy had deemed too expensive or politically sensitive for operational deployment. Seeing these technologies operational in enemy hands revealed the efficiency of corporate procurement versus government acquisition procedures. "These systems," he transmitted with quiet amazement that carried across encrypted frequencies to teammates processing implications of technological transfer that violated everything they'd believed about security protocols, "were developed by American contractors for American military units. Someone just gave them to the Taliban." The admission hung across radio communications like cordite smoke, poisoning any remaining illusion that their mission served legitimate military objectives rather than corporate damage control for classified treason that reached highest levels of government and defense industry collaboration, with forces that killed American personnel using American-developed weapons and tactics. Staff Sergeant Restre, the radio crackled to life at 3:47 hours, breaking the desert silence with static that shouldn't exist. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Vega pressed his earpiece deeper, certain he'd misheard. The transmission came again, clearer this time, from a frequency that belonged to a dead man. Viper 17 to any station, requesting immediate vector to LZ Whiskey. Package inbound, ETA 12 minutes. The voice carried a distinctive rasp, unmistakable to anyone who'd served in the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Captain Kine moved through the cargo bay with practiced efficiency, checking equipment and personnel with the methodical attention to detail that had made her legendary among Special Operations aviation. But something fundamental had changed during her 18 months of corporate servitude, a hardness around the eyes, a precision in movement that suggested violence held barely in check, the body language of someone who'd learned to kill for reasons that extended beyond patriotic duty. "Insertion point," she announced, her voice carrying above engine noise with tactical authority that death hadn't diminished, "is 2 kilometers southeast of the target facility. Intelligence suggests minimal perimeter security, but prepared defensive positions concentrated around the main structure." She activated a tablet displaying satellite imagery that revealed the target compound in stark detail. Concrete buildings arranged around a central courtyard, vehicle access roads that could serve as fields of fire, elevated positions that provided commanding views of approaches. It was a fortress designed by someone who understood special operations tactics intimately. "The technology package," Cross interjected from his position near the aircraft's communication array, "is located in the primary structure's basement level. Classified documents, prototype hardware, and research data worth more than this entire operation's annual budget." Staff Sergeant Restrepo studied the imagery with professional attention, recognizing defensive preparations that went beyond standard Taliban capabilities. Someone with advanced military training had advised the enemy on optimal positioning, fields of fire, and kill zones designed specifically to counter American special operations tactics. The betrayal extended beyond mere information sharing to active collaboration in designing death traps. "Sir," he said, addressing Cross with barely concealed contempt, "those defensive positions look designed by someone familiar with our standard operating procedures, someone who knew exactly how we'd approach this target." The billionaire's smile carried predatory satisfaction that confirmed Restrepo's worst suspicions. Military tactics evolve through practical application. The enemy learns from each engagement, adapting their methods to counter American advantages. We must be prepared for resistance that incorporates lessons learned from previous encounters. The admission hung between them like artillery smoke, revealing that Cross's organization had likely provided tactical intelligence to enemy forces as part of elaborate schemes to create justification for private military solutions to complex problems. They weren't just cleaning up treachery. They were participants in staged conflicts designed to serve corporate interests. Petty Officer Martinez felt his weapons weight differently now, understanding that the mission extended beyond simple extraction to encompass institutional betrayal at levels that challenged his comprehension of military service. Someone wearing American uniform had designed this trap, provided intelligence that would maximize casualties, created circumstances that would justify increased corporate involvement in military operations. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Kine with the respect her rank demanded despite circumstances that made hierarchy meaningless, "what's our extraction plan if things go sideways?" Her expression shifted slightly, revealing glimpses of tactical planning that extended beyond immediate mission parameters. The C-130 will maintain orbit at safe distance until package recovery is confirmed. If extraction becomes untenable, fallback position is 12 kilometers north, abandoned airstrip that can accommodate emergency landing. She paused, letting implications settle among men who understood that backup plans often became primary requirements when operations involved deliberate betrayal. Mission duration is limited by fuel constraints and hostile air defense capabilities. We have approximately 90 minutes before tactical circumstances become untenable. The time frame imposed urgency that transformed philosophical doubt into operational necessity. Whatever reservations they harbored about serving corporate interests, mission success now depended on professional execution of tactical objectives within narrow parameters that left no room for moral hesitation. Lieutenant Commander Vega keyed his radio with deliberate precision, opening communications that would coordinate their descent into moral compromise. Viper 77 to Titan's daughter. Request 5-minute warning for insertion. Kine's voice crackled back through aircraft communications with pilot's precision. Copy, Viper 77. 5 minutes to drop zone. Weather conditions nominal, no hostile activity detected on approach vectors. The professional competence couldn't mask psychological damage that 18 months of corporate servitude had inflicted on someone who'd once embodied everything noble about military aviation. She traded heroic death for complicated survival, exchanging warriors' honor for billionaires' gold in transactions that poisoned the sacred trust between military personnel and the nation they served. The C-130 began its descent toward target coordinates, carrying warriors into battle for masters they despised in pursuit of objectives that violated everything they'd sworn to defend. It was modern warfare distilled to its toxic essence, corporate interests purchasing military capability, while patriotic rhetoric concealed profit motives that treated human lives as acceptable losses in quarterly earnings reports. Lyra Viper Kine had been shot down over Syria 18 months ago. Her C-130J Super Hercules, call sign Titan's daughter, had vanished into a sandstorm with no survivors recovered. The Pentagon had held a closed casket funeral. Vega had been there, watching as they folded the flag over an empty box. Now that same voice was cutting through encrypted channels like a ghost, returning from war's purgatory. The SEAL team clustered around their forward operating base looked up from weapon maintenance. Staff Sergeant Diego Restrepo, a 15-year veteran with 3 Purple Hearts, set down his M4 and stared at the radio. These men had heard death speak before, but never from beyond the grave. "Sir," whispered Petty Officer Nakamura, his voice barely audible above the desert wind, "that's impossible." Vega's hands trembled as he reached for the handset. Protocol demanded verification codes, authentication sequences, proof of identity. But something in that transmission, a subtle modulation, the way she pronounced vector, convinced him that impossible had just become tactical reality. The SEALs had refused his orders 30 minutes earlier. A billionaire defense contractor named Bartholomew Cross had inserted himself into their mission through political channels, demanding they extract his research asset from a Taliban stronghold 20 clicks north. The team had balked. Cross wasn't military. He had no authority over special operations. They'd told Vega to relay their position, negative on unauthorized civilian interference. But now the night sky hummed with approaching turboprops. 4 massive engines, by the sound, definitely a C-130. The aircraft's navigation lights appeared first, red and green pinpricks against star-drunk darkness. Then the outline materialized, the distinctive high wing and extended fuselage of a Hercules, flying without escort through hostile airspace. Impossible didn't begin to cover it. Dead pilots don't fly missions. Billionaires don't land cargo planes in active combat zones. And SEAL teams don't freeze like statues when confronted with mysteries that violate the basic laws of military mortality. Yet here they stood, weapons forgotten, watching a phantom aircraft descend toward their position with the deliberate precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. The desert held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting for answers that might redefine everything they thought they knew about war, death, and the thin line between the two. The C-130's landing lights blazed to life, turning sand into gold dust and shadows into secrets. Whatever was about to happen would change everything. The SEALs could feel it in their bones, that electric anticipation that precedes either salvation or catastrophe. In their world, the two were often indistinguishable. Above them, Viper was coming home. The question was, from where? Captain Lyra Kine's fingers danced across the C-130's control panel with muscle memory that death couldn't erase. The instruments glowed softly in the cockpit's red-tinted darkness, each dial and switch a familiar friend in an aircraft that should have been her tomb. 18 months of classified resurrection had taught her to trust the impossible, but landing in hostile territory still required the same careful choreography she'd learned as a young pilot fresh from flight school. "Titan's daughter on final approach," she transmitted, her voice carrying across desert frequencies with practiced calm. "LZ Whiskey, confirm winds and obstacles." The silence that followed stretched longer than tactical prudence allowed. Below, she could see the SEAL team's infrared markers arranged in a rough diamond pattern around their makeshift landing zone. 12 figures stood motionless, their thermal signatures bright against cooling sand. She recognized the body language of trained killers experiencing something beyond their operational parameters. Her co-pilot, a ghost she'd inherited from whatever shadow organization had brought her back, adjusted the flap settings without speaking. Captain James Spector Morrison had died in Afghanistan 2 years before her own supposed demise, yet here he sat, working through landing procedures with the same methodical precision that had once made him legendary among special operations aviators. They'd never discussed their mutual resurrections. Some conversations were too dangerous for the living. The C-130 touched down with barely a whisper, its massive tires kissing sand with the gentle precision of controlled violence. Thrust reversers engaged automatically, bringing 47 tons of aircraft to a combat stop in less than 800 feet. The propellers continued their hypnotic rotation, ready for immediate departure should circumstances require tactical flexibility. Through the cockpit windows, Kine watched the SEAL team approach with weapons lowered but ready. Their movement patterns spoke of confusion layered beneath professional caution. These were men accustomed to impossible missions, but not impossible resurrections. She could read their body language like tactical doctrine, curiosity warring with suspicion, training overriding supernatural dread. Lieutenant Commander Vega stepped forward first, his face a map of questions that military protocol couldn't answer. Behind him, the SEALs maintained a loose perimeter, their night vision devices sweeping the aircraft's exterior for threats that might emerge from shadow and steel. Staff Sergeant Restrepo kept one hand near his sidearm, unconscious preparation for violence that might wear a friendly face. The cargo ramp began its hydraulic descent, revealing the aircraft's interior illuminated by red combat lighting. Bartholomew Cross stepped into view, his civilian clothes incongruous against military hardware worth more than small nations' defense budgets. The billionaire's presence transformed the landing from mysterious to politically volatile, raising questions about authority, jurisdiction, and the murky boundaries between corporate influence and military operations. Cross descended the ramp with the confident stride of someone accustomed to purchasing solutions to complex problems. His security detail followed, 6 operators whose bearings suggested former special forces, now serving private interests with government-issued weapons. The contradiction made Kine's skin crawl. She'd spent her career serving something larger than profit margins, and watching mercenaries masquerade as patriots felt like betrayal dressed in tactical gear. The desert wind caught her hair as she emerged from the cockpit, strands of auburn catching moonlight like copper wire. 18 months of classified existence had changed her, leaner now, harder, with eyes that had seen too much of what happened when the dead returned to serve agendas they couldn't understand. But her flight suit still bore the wings she'd earned through blood, sweat, and 5,000 hours of keeping impossible aircraft aloft through impossible circumstances. The SEALs watched her approach, their confusion deepening with each step. Dead heroes weren't supposed to walk among the living, especially not in service to billionaires with unclear motivations and unlimited resources. Staff Sergeant Restrepo's world shifted sideways as he watched Captain Kine approach their perimeter. 15 years of special operations had taught him to trust his instincts above everything else, and every instinct screamed impossibility. He'd attended her memorial service at Arlington, stood at attention as they played taps over an empty grave. The woman walking toward them wore the same confident stride, the same unconscious way of adjusting her flight suit's sleeve that he remembered from joint operations in Iraq. "Holy shit," whispered Petty Officer Martinez, his voice barely audible through team communications. "That's actually her. That's actually Viper." The call sign carried weight beyond mere identification. Viper Kine had earned legendary status among Special Operations Aviation, the pilot who'd extracted them from Fallujah when everything went sideways, who'd landed a burning helicopter in Mosul to retrieve wounded Marines, who'd flown through Syrian air defenses like they were morning traffic. Seeing her alive violated the natural order of military mortality. Lieutenant Commander Vega stepped forward, his hand unconsciously moving to his sidearm before training overrode paranoia. "Captain Kine," he called, his voice carrying across windswept sand with forced authority. "State your authentication code." She paused 20 feet away, close enough for conversation but distant enough to maintain tactical spacing. Her response came in the clipped cadence of someone accustomed to hostile receptions. "Tango 77 November Golf Alpha." The code was correct. Vega felt something cold settle in his stomach. Authentication sequences weren't supposed to survive death, yet here stood a ghost reciting classified information with casual precision. Behind him, he could feel his team's confusion deepening into something approaching existential crisis. "Ma'am," Restrepo interrupted, stepping forward with the casual insubordination that special operators wielded like tactical weapons. "With respect, you're supposed to be dead." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, there and gone like desert lightning. Death was temporary, the mission wasn't. Bartholomew Cross chose that moment to make his entrance, striding down the C-130's cargo ramp with the theatrical confidence of someone accustomed to purchasing the impossible. His security detail fanned out in professional formation, their weapons maintained in low-ready positions that suggested violence held barely in check. The billionaire himself wore tactical clothing that looked expensive and unused, the kind of gear purchased by civilians who believed equipment could substitute for experience. "Gentlemen," Cross announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of corporate boardrooms, "thank you for your patience. Captain Kine and I have a proposal that will revolutionize your understanding of modern warfare." The SEALs exchanged glances that could have cut glass. Restrepo's jaw tightened with the particular frustration reserved for civilians who believed money could purchase military expertise. These men had bled for flag and country, lost friends to enemy fire, endured separations that destroyed marriages and fractured families. They didn't need lectures from billionaires about warfare's evolution. "Sir," Vega responded with diplomatic frost, "this is a classified military operation. Civilian oversight isn't authorized or welcome." Cross smiled with predatory patience. "Commander, I'm afraid you're operating under outdated assumptions. Captain Kine's resurrection was funded by my organization. Her aircraft, her crew, her mission, all purchased with private capital operating under classified government contracts. She belongs to me now." The words hung in desert air like poison gas. Kine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes, rage perhaps, or shame at being reduced to corporate property. The SEALs felt their collective hackles rise. Military service meant many things, but ownership by private interests violated every principle they'd sworn to defend. Restrepo stepped forward, his movement casual but unmistakably threatening. "With respect, sir, soldiers aren't for sale. Not in our military." "Your military," Cross replied with satisfaction, "is increasingly funded by my industry. The lines between public service and private enterprise become more blurred each fiscal year. Captain Kine represents the future of defense contracting, highly skilled personnel operating advanced equipment under corporate management." The desert wind carried the scent of approaching storm, metallic and electric. The silence stretched taut as piano wire, broken only by the C-130's idling engines and desert wind threading through weapons and equipment. Petty Officer Nakamura shifted his weight, boot leather creaking against sand, with the subtle sound of patience wearing thin. His night vision device swept the perimeter automatically, while his mind processed impossibilities that challenged 15 years of military certainty. Cross continued his corporate pitch with the tone of someone accustomed to purchasing compliance. "The Pentagon's budget constraints have created opportunities for private solutions to complex problems. Captain Kine's team specializes in missions that official channels cannot acknowledge, rescues that never happened, extractions that leave no diplomatic footprint." "Mercenary work," Vega said flatly, the accusation hanging between them like drawn steel. Kine spoke for the first time since authentication, her voice carrying decades of flying through hostile fire. "Not mercenaries, ghosts. We handle operations that require complete deniability. No official records, no congressional oversight, no families to notify when things go wrong." The admission struck the SEAL team like physical blows. These were men who understood sacrifice, who'd signed blank checks payable with their lives to the United States of America. The concept of soldiers operating beyond accountability, beyond honor, beyond the sacred trust between warrior and nation, violated everything they'd sworn to defend. Martinez keyed his radio with barely controlled fury. "Control, Viper 7-7. Request immediate clarification on civilian authority over ongoing operations." The response crackled through encrypted channels with bureaucratic evasion. "Viper 7-7, defer to on-ground authority. Mission parameters classified above your clearance level." Even their own command structure was compromising them, selling their mission to corporate interests with the casual efficiency of quarterly profit reports. Restrepo felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of military service. The flag they'd sworn to defend was apparently for rent to the highest bidder. Cross gestured toward the C-130's open cargo bay, where shadows concealed equipment that glinted with military precision. "The package we're extracting contains technology worth more than this entire operation's annual budget. My client has invested considerable resources in its development, and recent intelligence suggests hostile forces have acquired portions of the research." "What kind of technology?" Vega demanded, his tone suggesting that patience was approaching tactical exhaustion. "The kind that changes warfare fundamentally," Kine answered, stepping closer with the predatory grace of someone who'd learned to kill from 30,000 feet. "Quantum communication systems, battlefield AI integration, weapons platforms that make current special operations look like stone knives and bearskins." She paused, letting implications settle like radioactive dust. The Taliban didn't steal this equipment by accident. Someone with government clearance and corporate access provided precise intelligence about its location, capabilities, and tactical value. "We're not just extracting technology, we're cleaning up treason." The revelation hit the SEAL team like shaped charges detonating in sequence. Their mission wasn't asset recovery. It was damage control for classified betrayal at the highest levels of government. Someone with access to state secrets had sold American military technology to enemy forces, and now private contractors were being deployed to sanitize the evidence. Nakamura lowered his weapon with deliberate precision, the gesture carrying weight beyond mere tactical adjustment. "Ma'am, who exactly are we working for?" "That," Cross interrupted with corporate smoothness, "is information compartmentalized above your security clearance. Trust me when I say that patriotism and profit can coexist when properly managed." The billionaire's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind expensive dental work. These were the sharks who circled military budgets, feeding on classified contracts and congressional appropriations while warriors bled in foreign deserts. They wore suits instead of uniforms, fought battles in boardrooms instead of battlefields, and measured victory in stock prices rather than secured objectives. The C-130's engines shifted pitch slightly, a subtle reminder that time was running out for philosophical discussions. Whatever they decided would determine not just mission success, but their understanding of who they served and why. Captain Kine watched the internal struggle play across 12 faces trained to reveal nothing. These SEALs represented everything she'd once believed about military service: honor, loyalty, sacrifice for causes larger than personal gain. Seeing that faith collide with contemporary reality felt like watching innocence die in slow motion. She'd made the same journey 18 months ago, trading heroic death for complicated resurrection in service to masters who measured valor in quarterly earnings. "The target facility," she continued, her voice carrying tactical authority that death couldn't diminish, "is 47 kilometers northeast of your current position. Intelligence suggests 15 to 20 hostiles, armed with RPGs, heavy machine guns, and improvised explosive devices. Standard Taliban defensive posture, but with one critical difference." She paused, letting combat experience speak to combat experience. These men understood that differences in enemy behavior usually meant differences in casualty projections. "They're expecting us." Someone provided detailed information about American recovery operations, including timing, personnel, and extraction procedures. "This isn't a rescue mission. It's a trap designed to eliminate everyone with knowledge of the technology transfer." Staff Sergeant Restrepo's expression darkened with professional anger. Ambushes were acceptable risks in special operations, occupational hazards that came with the territory. But walking into deliberate betrayal violated the fundamental trust that held military units together. Someone wearing American uniform had sold their lives to buy political cover for corporate malfeasance. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" Martinez demanded, his weapon shifting to a position that could engage friendly targets if necessary. "How do we know this whole thing isn't another layer of the trap?" The question hung between them like a blade balanced on its edge. Kine could see the logic behind his suspicion: dead pilots returning to life in service to Billionaire's stretched credibility beyond reasonable limits. Trust required evidence, and evidence was exactly what she couldn't provide without revealing classified programs that existed beyond congressional oversight. "You don't," she admitted with the brutal honesty that special operations demanded. "But you know what happens if you refuse the mission. Cross has enough political connections to end your careers, transfer you to assignments where your skills are wasted, ensure that your teams are broken up and scattered across conventional units." She gestured toward the billionaire, who was examining his expensive watch with theatrical impatience. "Corporate influence penetrates military hierarchy deeper than most warriors realize. Private contractors provide equipment, training, intelligence, and increasingly, operational authority. Refusing his requirements means fighting a war on two fronts: enemy forces ahead, political retaliation behind." Lieutenant Commander Vega felt the weight of impossible choices settling across his shoulders like a flak jacket made of thorns. Accept the mission and compromise every principle he'd sworn to uphold. Refuse and watch his team's careers destroyed by political machinery, beyond their ability to resist. Either option left them serving interests that viewed military personnel as expendable assets rather than warriors deserving respect. Cross stepped forward with predatory timing, sensing weakness in their moral certainty. Gentlemen, philosophical purity is a luxury that modern warfare cannot afford. The enemy adapts, technology evolves, and military structures must adjust accordingly. Private enterprise provides flexibility that government bureaucracy cannot match. What you're describing, Vega replied with ice-cold precision, sounds like the privatization of national defense. Soldiers serving corporate masters instead of constitutional principles. Soldiers serving victory instead of political theater, Cross corrected smoothly. Results matter more than methods when American lives hang in the balance. The technology in that facility could save thousands of our people if properly utilized, or kill thousands if it remains in enemy hands. The billionaire's logic was sound even as it violated everything they'd been taught about military service. Warriors were supposed to serve ideals higher than profit margins, but ideals didn't stop bullets or prevent casualties. If corporate resources could accomplish missions that government bureaucracy couldn't authorize, did the source of funding matter more than operational success? The desert wind carried the scent of approaching weather, metallic and electric with the promise of violence. Petty Officer Nakamura broke the silence with a question that cut through philosophical complexity like armor-piercing ammunition. What happened to you, ma'am? Really happened. Not the official story, not the corporate narrative. What did they do to bring you back? Kind's expression shifted, revealing glimpses of trauma that military bearing couldn't quite conceal. Her fingers unconsciously traced a scar along her jawline, barely visible in the red glow of combat lighting, but pronounced enough to suggest violence survived rather than avoided. The aircraft went down in a Syrian sandstorm, she began, her voice carrying the flat cadence of someone recounting nightmares. Enemy fire took out our starboard engine, and we lost hydraulics at altitude. Standard emergency procedures, textbook crash landing in hostile territory. She paused, memory adding weight to words that should have been routine. My crew died on impact. Co-pilot, loadmaster, 2 passengers gone instantly. I survived with a concussion, fractured ribs, and a leg that wouldn't support my weight. Then the locals arrived. The SEALs listened with professional attention, recognizing the tone of someone who'd endured interrogation beyond their training parameters. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. The acronym every special operator knew, the contingency they all prepared for but hoped never to experience. 18 hours of questioning, she continued, each word measured and deliberate. They wanted information about flight routes, aircraft capabilities, personnel assignments. Standard intelligence gathering, but with techniques that suggested professional training rather than improvised brutality. Her eyes found Cross, who was pretending to examine equipment while obviously monitoring her revelation. The billionaire's expression remained neutral, but something predatory flickered behind corporate composure. Then he arrived, Kind said, indicating Cross with a gesture that carried decades of military precision weaponized into accusation. Not as a rescuer, but as a purchaser. My captors had been in communication with his representatives from the beginning. The entire shoot-down was orchestrated to create leverage. The admission struck the SEAL team like shaped charges detonating in their understanding of military honor. Cross hadn't rescued Kind from enemy captivity. He'd purchased her from contractors who'd arranged her capture. The distinction transformed her from rescued hero to corporate property acquired through elaborate deception. Restrepo's hand moved unconsciously toward his sidearm muscle memory, responding to threats that wore friendly faces. You're telling us he had you shot down deliberately. Negative, she replied with pilot's precision. The mission was legitimate, the crash accidental, but Cross's organization had contingency agreements with local forces, purchase options on any captured American personnel with specialized skills. They bought me like salvage equipment, then offered a choice: work for them or remain officially dead. The revelation hung in desert air like cordite smoke, poisoning every assumption about rescue, duty, and the value of American lives. Cross had weaponized military honor against itself, offering survival in exchange for service to interests that viewed warriors as purchasable commodities. Martinez keyed his radio with barely controlled fury. Control, Viper 77, requesting immediate clarification on civilian contractor authority over recovered personnel. Static answered, then bureaucratic evasion. Viper 77, maintain operational security. Discussion of personnel recovery methods compromises ongoing classified programs. Even their own command structure was complicit, using radio discipline to silence questions about institutional betrayal. The flag they'd sworn to defend was apparently willing to sell its defenders to maintain plausible deniability about methods that violated every principle of military honor. Cross stepped forward with corporate timing, sensing that moral certainty was crumbling under weight of practical necessity. Captain Kine's resurrection represents innovative solutions to complex personnel problems. Military casualties are costly in financial terms, political capital, and public morale. Private recovery and redeployment eliminates these inefficiencies. Inefficiencies, Vega repeated, the word carrying enough contempt to melt steel. You're talking about American lives. I'm talking about American victory, Cross replied with predatory satisfaction. Results matter more than methods when national security hangs in the balance. The standoff crystallized into something approaching tactical geometry, with weapons and loyalties forming angles that could turn lethal without warning. Captain Kine stood at the intersection of impossible choices, her resurrection a symbol of everything wrong with modern warfare: corporate influence corrupting military honor, private interests purchasing public servants, death itself becoming negotiable for those with sufficient resources. Staff Sergeant Restrepo stepped forward with the casual insubordination that made special operators legendary. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." "Granted," she replied, recognizing the tone of someone who decided that honesty mattered more than hierarchy. "This is all fucked," he said with the brutal precision that 15 years of combat had taught him. "Begging your pardon, but selling American soldiers to billionaires violates everything we swore to defend. I don't care what kind of technology we're recovering or what kind of political connections Cross has. Some things aren't for sale." The words carried weight beyond mere opinion. These were warriors who'd bled for principles larger than profit margins, who'd endured separations and sacrifices that corporate executives couldn't comprehend. Reducing their service to market transactions felt like betrayal dressed in patriotic rhetoric. Cross smiled with predatory patience, recognizing resistance that could be overcome through proper application of leverage. "Sergeant, your idealism is admirable but impractical. The enemy doesn't share your ethical constraints. They purchase equipment, recruit personnel, and develop capabilities using whatever resources are available. American forces must adapt or accept strategic disadvantage." "The enemy," Martinez interjected with ice-cold precision, "doesn't claim to represent the United States Constitution. We do. That document doesn't include provisions for selling soldiers to private industry." The billionaire's composure flickered momentarily, revealing glimpses of annoyance beneath corporate polish. These warriors were proving more resistant to financial logic than quarterly projections had suggested. Political connections and economic leverage worked effectively against bureaucrats and politicians, but special operators possessed inconvenient principles that complicated standard negotiation techniques. "Gentlemen," Cross said, his tone shifting toward barely concealed threat, "you're operating under antiquated assumptions about military structure. Private contractors provide 60% of logistical support for current operations. Corporate entities design, manufacture, and maintain 90% of your equipment. Defense industry employees outnumber active duty personnel 3 to 1. He paused, letting implications settle like radioactive dust across their understanding of military service. Your oath was to defend American interests. I represent American interests more directly than any government bureaucrat or political appointee. Serving my requirements serves national security more effectively than following orders from officials who view military operations as political theater. The logic was sound even as it violated everything they'd been taught about duty, honor, and country. Modern warfare increasingly depended on corporate resources, private contractors, and industrial capabilities that existed beyond military control. If American interests required corporate methods to achieve strategic objectives, did the source of authority matter more than operational success? Kine watched the internal struggle play across 12 faces trained to reveal nothing, recognizing her own journey from military honor to corporate servitude compressed into moments of crystalline decision. These men represented everything she'd once believed about service, sacrifice, and the sacred trust between warrior and nation. Watching that faith collide with contemporary reality felt like watching innocence die in formation flight. "The mission timeline," she said quietly, her voice cutting through philosophical complexity with tactical necessity, "requires departure within 30 minutes. The target facility will be reinforced after dawn, making extraction exponentially more difficult. Whatever we decide now." The C-130's engines shifted pitch slightly, a mechanical reminder that time was running out for moral certainty. Whatever they chose would define not just mission parameters, but their understanding of who they served and why they served. The desert held its breath, waiting for answers that might redefine everything about war, honor, and the price of victory. Lieutenant Commander Vega felt the weight of command settling across his shoulders like a flak jacket lined with thorns. 30 minutes to decide whether his team would serve corporate interests or maintain military principles that seemed increasingly obsolete in a world where warfare was purchased rather than fought. The choice would define not just mission parameters, but his understanding of leadership itself. "Captain," he said, addressing Kine with the respect her rank demanded despite circumstances that made hierarchy meaningless, "what are your orders regarding this extraction?" The question carried layers of meaning beyond simple chain of command. Vega was asking whether she still considered herself a military officer bound by oath and regulation, or a corporate employee serving private interests with government-issued weapons. The distinction would determine how his team responded to her authority. Kine straightened unconsciously, muscle memory responding to the ritual of military bearing, even as her mind processed loyalties that death had complicated beyond recognition. "My orders are to extract the technology package using whatever personnel and methods are necessary for mission success. Political considerations and ethical constraints are secondary to operational requirements." The words fell between them like artillery shells, destroying any illusion that resurrection had preserved her military honor intact. Cross had purchased more than her survival. He'd bought her willingness to subordinate warrior principles to corporate objectives. The transformation from hero to mercenary was complete, leaving only the hollow shell of someone who'd once embodied everything noble about military service. Petty Officer Martinez stepped back slightly, his weapon shifting to a position that could engage friendly targets if tactical circumstances required lethal solutions to political problems. "Ma'am, with respect, those aren't military orders. Those are corporate directives." "The distinction," she replied with pilot's precision, "becomes meaningless when national security requires private solutions to public problems. The technology in that facility could save American lives or end them, depending on who controls its application. Philosophical purity is a luxury that combat operations cannot afford. Cross nodded approvingly, recognizing arguments he'd helped craft during 18 months of converting captured warrior into corporate asset. The billionaire had studied military psychology extensively, learning to weaponize honor against itself, to transform loyalty into leverage that served private interests while maintaining patriotic rhetoric. Staff Sergeant Restrepo felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of military service, the recognition that modern warfare had evolved beyond traditional concepts of duty and honor. Corporate influence had penetrated military hierarchy so thoroughly that distinguishing between public service and private enterprise required navigation skills that weren't taught in special operations training. "Sir," he said, addressing Vega with the casual insubordination that made SEAL teams effective, "recommend we abort mission and return to base for clarification of authority structures." The suggestion carried weight beyond simple tactical withdrawal. Restrepo was proposing that they refuse corporate direction until proper military channels could establish legitimate chain of command. It was a principled stand that would likely end their careers while accomplishing nothing except symbolic resistance to institutional corruption. Vega considered options that ranged from inadequate to catastrophic. Accept Cross's authority and compromise every principle he'd sworn to defend. Refuse and watch political machinery destroy his team's ability to serve in any capacity. Either choice left them serving interests that viewed military personnel as expendable assets rather than warriors deserving respect and autonomy. The C-130's engines shifted pitch again, mechanical impatience adding urgency to decisions that would define the future of American military service. Private contractors were increasingly replacing uniformed personnel. Corporate executives were gaining authority over operational decisions, and traditional concepts of military honor were being subordinated to quarterly profit projections. "Negative," Vega replied after calculation that felt like a lifetime compressed into seconds. "We execute the mission as briefed. Questions about authority and ethics can be resolved after successful completion of assigned objectives." The decision hung between them like smoke from burning principles, acknowledging that sometimes warriors had to choose between competing definitions of service to country. They would serve corporate interests in order to preserve their ability to serve military ones, compromising honor in order to maintain operational capability. It was the kind of choice that ended careers, even when it saved lives. The desert wind carried the scent of approaching storm as the SEAL team prepared for insertion, their movements mechanical and precise, despite philosophical reservations that gnawed at military certainty like acid through steel. Equipment checks proceeded according to standard operating procedures, but conversations carried undertones of men questioning everything they'd believed about service, duty, and the sacred trust between warrior and nation. Petty Officer Nakamura adjusted his night vision device, with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly, muscle memory, responding to stress that extended beyond normal pre-mission anxiety. 15 years of special operations had taught him to compartmentalize doubt during tactical execution, but corporate corruption of military hierarchy challenged assumptions that formed the foundation of his professional identity. "Comms check," he muttered into his radio, voice carrying the flat cadence of someone performing ritual while contemplating heresy. "Viper 77 Alpha, radio check." Responses came back in sequence, each team member confirming equipment functionality, while avoiding discussion of moral implications that threatened to paralyze tactical effectiveness. They were preparing to serve private interests using government-issued weapons, violating oaths that had once seemed sacred in order to maintain operational capability in a world where principles had become negotiable commodities. Captain Kine supervised equipment loading with professional competence that couldn't quite mask the psychological damage of 18 months serving corporate masters. Her movements retained the precision of someone trained to military standards, but something essential had been compromised during her transition from warrior to purchased asset. Honor, once lost, apparently couldn't be restored through mere resurrection. Cross observed preparations with predatory satisfaction, recognizing the moment when military resistance collapsed under weight of practical necessity. These warriors had chosen compromise over principle, accepting corporate authority in order to preserve their ability to serve in diminished capacity. It was a victory that validated his understanding of human nature. Everyone had a price, even heroes. Mission timeline, Kine announced, her voice carrying across desert wind with tactical authority that death hadn't diminished. Requires insertion at target facility within 47 minutes. Intelligence suggests 15 to 20 hostiles with heavy weapons and prepared defensive positions. She paused, letting implications settle among men who understood that numbers often mattered less than motivation. They're expecting extraction attempts. Someone provided detailed information about American recovery procedures, including personnel assignments, equipment capabilities, and tactical methodologies. This engagement will be more challenging than standard Taliban resistance. Staff Sergeant Restrepo felt his jaw tighten with professional anger that extended beyond mere operational difficulty. Betrayal by fellow Americans violated the fundamental trust that held military units together, transforming routine missions into elaborate death traps designed to eliminate witnesses to institutional corruption. Someone wearing uniform had sold their lives to purchase political cover for corporate malfeasance. Rules of engagement, Martinez asked, his tone suggesting that standard procedures might be inadequate for circumstances that involved American treachery as well as enemy resistance. Whatever force is necessary to complete the mission, she replied with pilot's precision that couldn't quite conceal moral exhaustion. The technology package takes priority over all other considerations, including personnel safety. The admission hung between them like cordite smoke, poisoning any remaining illusion that this mission served traditional military objectives. They weren't rescuing American assets or protecting national security. They were cleaning up evidence of classified betrayal while serving masters who measured success in quarterly earnings rather than preserved lives. Lieutenant Commander Vega keyed his radio with deliberate precision, opening communication channels that would record their descent into moral compromise for posterity. Control, Viper 77, departing LZ Whiskey for extraction mission. ETA target facility, 23 minutes. Static answered, then bureaucratic acknowledgement that carried no encouragement or tactical guidance. Copy, Viper 77. Mission parameters remain classified. Maintain radio silence except for emergency communications. Even their own command structure was distancing itself from operations that violated traditional military ethics, using communication protocols to establish plausible deniability about methods that served corporate interests rather than national ones. The warriors were on their own, serving masters they didn't trust in pursuit of objectives they couldn't discuss. The C-130's cargo ramp began its hydraulic ascent, sealing them inside mechanical belly of aircraft that represented everything wrong with modern warfare. The aircraft shuddered as Captain Morrison adjusted descent parameters, his ghostly competence evident in subtle control inputs that kept the massive C-130 stable despite turbulence that could have challenged lesser pilots. Death hadn't diminished his flying skills, but 18 months of corporate resurrection had stripped away illusions about service and sacrifice that once made military aviation seem like calling rather than career. 2 minutes, Kine announced over internal communications, her voice carrying the professional detachment that special operations demanded when tactical execution required compartmentalization of moral doubt. Final equipment check. Confirm radio frequencies. Prepare for tactical insertion. The SEAL team responded with mechanical precision that couldn't quite mask philosophical reservations about serving private interests with government-issued weapons. Equipment checks proceeded according to standard operating procedures, but conversations carried undertones of warriors questioning fundamental assumptions about duty, honor, and the sacred trust between military personnel and constitutional principles. Staff Sergeant Restrepo adjusted his weapon's optics with hands that had performed similar actions thousands of times, muscle memory responding to pre-combat ritual, while his mind processed betrayal that challenged 15 years of military certainty. Someone wearing American uniform had designed this trap, provided tactical intelligence that would maximize casualties, created circumstances that justified corporate involvement in operations that should have remained within military command structure. "Comms check," Petty Officer Nakamura muttered into his radio, voice carrying the flat cadence of someone performing routine while contemplating heresy. "Viper 77 Alpha, final radio check before insertion." Responses came back in sequence, each team member confirming equipment functionality, while avoiding discussion of moral implications that threatened to paralyze tactical effectiveness. They were warriors serving billionaires, using military training to advance corporate objectives that treated national security as marketing opportunity rather than sacred duty. Cross observed preparations with predatory satisfaction, recognizing the moment when military resistance collapsed under weight of practical necessity. These men had chosen operational capability over philosophical purity, accepting corporate authority in order to maintain their ability to serve in diminished capacity. It was victory that validated his understanding of human nature. Everyone served someone, and everyone had price points that could be negotiated. "The facility's basement level," he announced, raising his voice above engine noise with corporate authority that had purchased the right to command military personnel, "contains classified research that could revolutionize modern warfare. Quantum communication systems, artificial intelligence integration, weapons platforms that make current special operations capabilities obsolete." He paused, letting implications settle among men who understood that technological advancement often came at costs measured in blood rather than budget allocations. "Hostile forces have acquired portions of this research through American treachery. Our mission eliminates evidence of institutional betrayal while recovering assets that serve national security interests." The explanation transformed their descent from simple extraction to damage control for classified treason at levels that extended beyond their security clearances. Someone with government access had sold military secrets to enemy forces, then arranged cleanup operations that served corporate interests while maintaining plausible deniability about methods that violated traditional concepts of military honor. Lieutenant Commander Vega felt command weight settling across his shoulders like flak jacket lined with moral compromise. His team was about to serve private interests using public resources, violating oaths that had once seemed sacred in order to maintain operational effectiveness in a world where principles had become negotiable commodities subject to quarterly profit projections. "1 minute," Kine's voice crackled through communications with pilot's precision that couldn't mask psychological damage of serving corporate masters who measured success in earnings rather than preserved lives. "Final approach to drop zone. Prepare for tactical insertion." The C-130's cargo ramp began its hydraulic descent, revealing desert landscape illuminated by starlight and tactical necessity. Whatever happened in the next 90 minutes would define not just mission success, but their understanding of what American military service had become in an age when warfare was increasingly purchased rather than fought. The ramp touched desert sand with barely audible whisper, metal kissing earth with precision that spoke to thousands of hours practicing tactical insertions in hostile territory. 12 SEALs moved down the incline with fluid coordination that made violence look like choreography, their night vision devices transforming darkness into green-tinted tactical opportunity, where shadows could conceal death or salvation with equal efficiency. Staff Sergeant Restrepo hit the ground first, his weapon sweeping defensive arcs while teammates flowed around him like water, finding optimal paths through landscape that had been mapped, analyzed, and memorized during flight preparation. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, offering concealment and exposure in equal measure, depending on movement techniques that separated professionals from casualties in special operations warfare. Viper 77 on ground, Lieutenant Commander Vega transmitted with quiet precision that carried across encrypted frequencies to aircraft already climbing toward tactical altitude. Beginning movement to objective. Estimated time en route, 18 minutes. The response crackled back through communications with pilots' authority that death hadn't diminished. Copy, Viper 77. Titan's daughter maintaining overwatch at Angels 15. Call sign Spectre monitoring tactical frequencies. Captain Kine's voice carried weight beyond mere radio protocol. The sound of someone who'd learned to coordinate ground operations from 30,000 feet, while serving masters who measured success in quarterly earnings rather than preserved lives. Her resurrection had purchased tactical competence but sacrificed military honor in transactions that poisoned the sacred trust between warriors and the nation they'd sworn to defend. The SEAL team moved across open desert with practiced efficiency that made 12 heavily armed men nearly invisible against landscape that had swallowed armies throughout history. Their formation provided overlapping fields of fire while maintaining tactical spacing that could survive enemy contact without total unit compromise. Professional competence applied to serving corporate interests that violated everything they'd been taught about duty and sacrifice. Petty Officer Martinez took point position, his night vision revealing terrain that looked deceptively simple but concealed dozens of potential ambush sites, where enemy forces could achieve tactical advantage through superior positioning and prepared fields of fire. Someone with advanced military training had obviously advised hostile forces on optimal defensive arrangements designed specifically to counter American special operations approaches. Movement, he whispered into radio communications that connected 12 warriors serving Billionaire's agenda, 200 meters northeast. Single individual, no weapon visible. The sighting triggered immediate tactical responses that transformed philosophical doubt into operational necessity. Personal reservations about corporate authority became irrelevant when enemy contact threatened mission success and team survival. They were warriors first, philosophers never, especially when bullets started flying in foreign deserts far from congressional oversight or media attention. Staff Sergeant Restrepo adjusted his scope with hands that had performed similar actions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and classified locations that didn't appear on official deployment records. 15 years of special operations had taught him to compartmentalize moral doubt during tactical execution, but serving private interests felt like betrayal dressed in patriotic rhetoric designed to purchase compliance with institutional corruption. Confirmed, he transmitted with professional precision that couldn't mask psychological damage of realizing that modern military service increasingly meant serving corporate masters who purchased government authority through political contributions and lobbying expenditures. Single hostile, moving toward compound perimeter. No additional contacts visible. The target facility appeared as planned, concrete structures arranged around central courtyard, with defensive positions that revealed professional military advice in their design and implementation. Someone with American training had advised enemy forces on optimal fields of fire, kill zones, and tactical approaches that would maximize casualties among special operations personnel attempting standard extraction procedures. Lieutenant Commander Vega felt command weight settling across his shoulders as he processed intelligence that confirmed their worst suspicions about institutional betrayal. They weren't just recovering stolen technology. They were cleaning up evidence of treason that extended to the highest levels of government and defense industry collaboration with hostile forces. Overwatch, he transmitted to aircraft circling overhead like Mechanical Angel, providing tactical support for warriors serving questionable masters. Beginning final approach to objective. Request confirmation of extraction timeline parameters. Captain Kine's response carried across encrypted frequencies with tactical authority that 18 months of corporate servitude couldn't completely diminish. Extraction window closes in 67 minutes. Hostile air defense systems activate at dawn, making overflight operations untenable. Mission parameters require completion within established timeline. The artificial deadline imposed urgency that transformed philosophical hesitation into operational necessity. Whatever reservations the SEAL team harbored about serving private interests, mission success now depended on professional execution within narrow temporal constraints that left no room for moral contemplation or ethical debate about the nature of modern military service. Staff Sergeant Restrepo led the approach toward compound perimeter, his night vision revealing defensive preparations that exceeded standard Taliban capabilities by significant margins. Concrete barriers positioned to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones, elevated positions that provided commanding fields of fire, communication equipment that suggested coordination capabilities beyond typical insurgent operations. Someone with advanced military training had transformed a simple facility into fortress, designed specifically to counter American special operations tactics. "Jesus Christ," whispered Petty Officer Nakamura, his voice barely audible through team communications as he identified defensive arrangements that looked like textbook examples from military academy coursework. These positions were designed by someone who knows exactly how we operate. The observation confirmed their worst suspicions about institutional betrayal that extended beyond simple information sharing to active collaboration in designing death traps for American military personnel. Someone wearing uniform had provided not just intelligence, but tactical expertise that would maximize casualties among warriors attempting standard extraction procedures. Lieutenant Commander Vega felt cold certainty settle in his stomach as he processed defensive arrangements that violated the fundamental trust between military units and their support structures. Betrayal by fellow Americans transformed routine missions into elaborate schemes designed to eliminate witnesses to corporate corruption, while maintaining plausible deniability about methods that served private interests rather than national security. Viper 77 to Overwatch, he transmitted with quiet precision that concealed growing anger about serving masters who treated military lives as acceptable losses in quarterly earnings projections. Compound defenses suggest advanced tactical planning. Recommend extended reconnaissance before assault initiation. Kine's response crackled back with pilot's authority that couldn't mask the psychological damage of serving billionaires who measured success in profit margins rather than preserved lives. Negative. Viper 77. Timeline constraints require immediate action. Intelligence suggests reinforcement arrival within 2 hours. Window of opportunity closing rapidly. The artificial pressure served corporate interests by preventing detailed analysis that might reveal the extent of American complicity in creating circumstances that justified private military solutions to complex problems. Cross's organization benefited from rapid tactical execution that minimized scrutiny of methods that violated traditional concepts of military honor and constitutional duty. Martinez moved forward with practiced stealth that made 200 pounds of warrior and equipment nearly invisible against desert landscape that had concealed predators for millennia. His approach revealed additional defensive preparations that suggested professional military engineering, interlocking fields of fire, prepared demolition charges, communication trenches that allowed defender movement without exposure to counter-sniper operations. "Sir," he transmitted with barely controlled anger that extended beyond tactical difficulty to encompass moral outrage about institutional betrayal. "This isn't random Taliban resistance. Someone with American training designed these defenses specifically to kill American personnel." The admission hung across encrypted frequencies like cordite smoke, poisoning any remaining illusion that their mission served legitimate military objectives rather than corporate damage control for classified treason that extended to the highest levels of government and defense industry collaboration with hostile forces. They were warriors serving billionaires, about to assault positions designed by American treachery to maximize casualties among patriots foolish enough to believe that military service still meant something larger than quarterly profit projections and corporate earnings statements. The first shot came from an elevated position that hadn't appeared on satellite imagery, muzzle flash revealing defensive arrangements that had been deliberately concealed from American surveillance systems. The bullet passed close enough to Staff Sergeant Restrepo's head that he could feel displaced air against his cheek, hypervelocity metal, carrying the distinctive crack of sniper fire from someone who understood ballistics, wind compensation, and target leading with professional competence. "Contact front," he shouted into radio communications that connected 12 warriors suddenly transformed from philosophical doubters into tactical necessities. "Sniper fire from compound perimeter, grid reference 77 Alpha." The team responded with fluid precision that made doubt irrelevant and corporate authority meaningless, when survival depended on professional execution of skills learned through years of training that prepared warriors for exactly these circumstances. Political reservations about billionaire masters disappeared when enemy bullets sought flesh with indiscriminate hunger that recognized no distinction between patriots and mercenaries. Lieutenant Commander Vega dropped behind available cover while processing tactical information that revealed defensive capabilities exceeding intelligence estimates by dangerous margins. Multiple muzzle flashes erupted from positions that provided interlocking fields of fire, transforming the compound approach into killing ground, designed specifically to channel American forces into predetermined death zones. "Overwatch, Viper 77." He transmitted with urgent precision that carried across encrypted frequencies to aircraft circling overhead like mechanical angels, providing tactical support for warriors serving questionable masters. "Taking effective fire from multiple positions. Request immediate close air support." Captain Kine's response crackled back through communications with pilots' authority that 18 months of corporate servitude couldn't completely compromise. "Negative on close air support. Mission parameters require minimal signature operations. You have organic weapons only." The denial confirmed their worst suspicions about serving private interests that prioritized deniability over tactical effectiveness, corporate liability over warrior survival. They were expendable assets rather than valued personnel, acceptable losses in schemes designed to advance billionaire agendas, while maintaining political distance from methods that violated international law and constitutional principles. Petty Officer Martinez returned fire with controlled bursts that revealed professional marksmanship training applied to circumstances that challenged everything he'd believed about military service. His bullets struck defensive positions that had been reinforced beyond standard construction methods, concrete and steel arrangements that suggested engineering expertise and significant financial investment in creating fortress capable of withstanding special operations assault. "These aren't standard Taliban positions," he transmitted with barely controlled anger that extended beyond tactical difficulty to encompass moral outrage about institutional betrayal. "Someone spent serious money hardening these defenses against our specific capabilities." The observation revealed layers of deception that transformed their mission from simple extraction to elaborate theater, designed to justify corporate involvement in military operations, while eliminating witnesses to treason that extended to the highest levels of government and defense industry collaboration with hostile forces. Staff Sergeant Restrepo advanced under covering fire with practiced aggression that made 15 years of combat experience evident in movement techniques that survived contact with enemy forces trained to counter American special operations tactics. His approach revealed additional defensive preparations that suggested months of planning by someone intimately familiar with SEAL team operational procedures. Flanking positions established, he transmitted with professional precision that couldn't mask psychological damage of realizing that modern military service increasingly meant serving corporate masters who purchased government authority through political contributions and lobbying expenditures that corrupted institutional integrity. Prepared defensive works suggest long-term preparation for American assault. Enemy fire intensified with coordinated precision that revealed communication capabilities beyond typical insurgent operations. Multiple positions engaged with overlapping fields of fire that channeled the SEAL team into kill zones designed specifically to maximize casualties among special operations personnel attempting standard extraction procedures. The compound had been transformed into an elaborate trap that would test everything they'd learned about tactical excellence, while serving interests that treated military lives as acceptable losses in quarterly earnings projections that measured success in profit margins, rather than preserved honor or constitutional duty. Petty Officer Nakamura moved with practiced stealth toward a flanking position that offered tactical advantage over defensive arrangements designed by someone who understood special operations methodology with uncomfortable intimacy. His night vision revealed prepared positions that incorporated lessons learned from decades of American military engagement, suggesting advisory support that went beyond simple intelligence sharing to active collaboration in designing killing grounds. Movement in compound courtyard, he transmitted with quiet precision that carried across encrypted frequencies to teammates engaging targets that returned fire with disciplined accuracy unusual for Taliban operations. Multiple hostiles, coordinated defensive posture, professional spacing, and communication procedures. The observation confirmed their worst fears about facing enemy forces trained by American personnel, who had provided not just tactical intelligence, but operational expertise designed to maximize casualties among warriors attempting standard extraction procedures. Someone wearing uniform had betrayed not just information but methodology, transforming routine mission into elaborate death trap. Lieutenant Commander Vega felt command weight settling across his shoulders as he processed tactical intelligence that revealed defensive capabilities exceeding preliminary estimates by dangerous margins. The compound had been fortified by someone who understood special operations vulnerabilities with the intimate knowledge that came from professional military training and classified operational experience. Viper 77 to all call signs, he transmitted with battlefield authority that corporate masters couldn't compromise when tactical circumstances required immediate decisive action. A just assault approach, standard procedures compromised, implementing contingency tactics. The decision represented more than tactical flexibility. It acknowledged that serving corporate interests required abandoning operational procedures designed to protect American lives in favor of methods that prioritized mission success over personnel survival. They were expendable assets rather than valued warriors, acceptable losses in schemes that advanced billionaire agendas while maintaining political deniability. Staff Sergeant Restrepo engaged targets with controlled aggression that made 15 years of combat experience evident in marksmanship that struck defensive positions with devastating accuracy. But enemy return fire demonstrated professional competence that suggested training by instructors familiar with American tactical doctrine, weapons handling, and battlefield communication procedures. Jesus, he muttered into radio communications that connected 12 warriors, suddenly confronting the reality of institutional betrayal at levels that challenged their understanding of military service. These guys know exactly how we operate. Someone taught them our playbook. The admission carried implications that extended beyond tactical difficulty to encompass moral crisis about serving masters who treated military lives as marketing opportunities rather than sacred trusts between warriors and constitutional principles. They were fighting enemy forces trained by American treachery to kill American personnel using American tactical knowledge purchased with American taxpayer funding. Martinez advanced under covering fire with professional aggression that survival demanded regardless of political reservations about corporate authority over military operations. His movement revealed additional defensive preparations that incorporated countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize special operations advantages in night warfare, close quarters combat, and coordinated team tactics. Explosive devices confirmed, he transmitted with barely controlled anger that extended beyond immediate tactical concerns to encompass institutional betrayal that violated fundamental trust between military units and their support structures. Professional placement, American ordnance, designed to channel assault forces into predetermined kill zones. The discovery revealed that enemy defensive preparations included weapons and explosives provided through classified American programs, either deliberately transferred or lost through administrative procedures designed to maintain plausible deniability about corporate collaboration with hostile forces. They were being shot at with bullets purchased with their own tax dollars. Captain Kine's voice crackled across communications with pilots' authority that 18 months of corporate servitude couldn't completely compromise. Viper 77, mission timeline critical. Package extraction required within 43 minutes. Recommend expedited tactical execution. The artificial pressure served corporate interests by preventing detailed reconnaissance that might reveal the full extent of American complicity in creating circumstances that justified private military solutions to problems that traditional military hierarchy couldn't officially acknowledge or address through legitimate channels. The assault reached its crescendo as Petty Officer Martinez breached the compound's outer perimeter through a gap in defensive arrangements that had been deliberately left vulnerable, a calculated invitation designed to channel attacking forces into prepared killing ground, where interlocking fields of fire would maximize casualties among American personnel. The recognition that even apparent tactical opportunities had been orchestrated by treacherous advisors added psychological weight to physical danger. Breach achieved, he transmitted with professional precision that couldn't mask growing awareness that every aspect of their tactical approach had been anticipated, analyzed, and countered by enemy forces advised by someone intimately familiar with special operations methodology. Moving toward primary structure, multiple defensive positions remaining active. Enemy fire continued with disciplined accuracy that revealed training by instructors who understood American tactical doctrine well enough to predict movement patterns, communication procedures, and assault techniques with uncomfortable precision. These weren't typical Taliban fighters. They were students of professional military education provided by treacherous American personnel who had sold operational knowledge to hostile forces. Staff Sergeant Restrepo provided covering fire while processing tactical intelligence that confirmed their worst suspicions about institutional betrayal that extended beyond simple information sharing to active collaboration in designing elaborate death traps for warriors who still believed that military service meant something larger than quarterly profit projections and corporate earnings statements. "Sir," he transmitted to Lieutenant Commander Vega with barely controlled anger that encompassed both immediate tactical concerns and broader moral outrage about serving corporate masters. Defensive arrangements suggest months of preparation by someone with classified knowledge of our operational procedures. This whole thing was planned from the beginning. The admission carried implications that transformed their mission from extraction operation to elaborate theater, designed to justify corporate involvement in military activities, while eliminating witnesses to treason that reached the highest levels of government and defense industry collaboration with hostile forces. They were participants in staged conflict rather than legitimate military operation. Vega felt command weight settling across his shoulders as he coordinated assault tactics that served billionaire interests rather than constitutional principles, using government-issued weapons to advance private agendas that treated military personnel as expendable assets rather than warriors deserving respect and institutional support from the nation they'd sworn to defend with their lives. All call signs, Viper 77. He transmitted with battlefield authority that corporate influence couldn't completely compromise when tactical circumstances required immediate decisive action. Primary structure in sight. Basement level contains objective package. Prepare for close quarters engagement. The target building revealed architectural features that suggested significant financial investment in creating fortress capable of withstanding special operations assault, reinforced construction, blast-resistant materials, defensive positions that provided commanding fields of fire over approach routes. Someone had spent serious money transforming simple facility into elaborate stronghold. Petty Officer Nakamura identified structural vulnerabilities that offered tactical opportunities despite defensive preparations designed to counter standard assault procedures. His reconnaissance revealed that building construction incorporated both hardening measures and deliberate weaknesses that would channel attacking forces toward predetermined engagement areas where prepared defenders could achieve maximum tactical advantage. Multiple entry points available. He transmitted with quiet precision that carried across encrypted frequencies to teammates preparing for close quarters combat that would test everything they'd learned about tactical excellence, while serving interests that measured success in profit margins rather than preserved honor or constitutional duty. But sir, he continued with growing awareness of strategic deception that extended beyond immediate tactical concerns, the accessible routes look designed to funnel us into specific areas, like they want us to enter through certain doors. The observation revealed that even apparent tactical opportunities had been orchestrated to serve enemy defensive plans, transforming routine assault procedures into elaborate choreography designed to maximize American casualties, while providing plausible justification for increased corporate involvement in military operations that traditional hierarchy couldn't officially acknowledge. Captain Kine's voice crackled across communications with pilots' authority that 18 months of corporate servitude couldn't completely diminish. Viper 77, 37 minutes remaining. Package extraction critical. Recommend immediate assault initiation. The artificial timeline continued serving corporate interests by preventing detailed tactical analysis that might reveal the full extent of American complicity in creating circumstances that justified private military solutions to problems that served billionaire agendas rather than national security interests or constitutional principles that military personnel had sworn to defend. Captain,